Since I was a child, I realized that life is quite hard and it is very difficult to survive if you do not have the necessary tools, especially when you are a child without a father and with a mother who does not take care of you 100%. That is why from a very young age, a gang practically controlled what happened in my neighborhood and in the neighboring neighborhoods. Like my mother, they have always been faithful believers in Santa Muerte, a belief that I adopted and that continues to accompany me to this day. Thanks to that lifestyle, I must tell you that I am not a man who is easily scared, and I believe without hesitation that there are forces that go beyond our control, such as witchcraft and entities that can help us, although they harm us along the way. In this way, I grew up among neighborhood fights and illegal businesses. I liked this life a lot. Because it was always full of emotions, you could do what you wanted because you had the support of your fellow students. Things were like this all the time until the day I met my wife. We understood each other from the moment we met, and we had a wonderful courtship, to the point of asking her to marry me, and I promised her that little by little I would distance myself from that life. My wife's family is quite large, and at that time it was very close, so much so that they lived in a large house that contained several apartments. In it lived her 2 parents and all her siblings with their respective spouses. She asked me to move in with her because she had her steps and we would be comfortable not having anything else to offer her. Considering that I was pregnant, I accepted. For a while everything went well. I went to work and I was calm knowing that my wife was in good hands. Shortly after she gave birth to our baby, who was a beautiful and healthy girl. I had heard many times that life changes when you have a child, but I never thought that all these things were true, but at least in my case it was true. I distanced myself from my comrades and also left behind many habits that I considered harmful to the environment in which my daughter would be raised, and my in-laws' house turned out to be very comfortable at first. From time to time, the 2,000 in-laws would barbecue and drink a few beers to pass the time. It is worth mentioning that in my native Oaxaca, people are very good at drinking, and normally these meetings extend until dawn or even for several days. One of those days, only one of my brothers-in-law, whom I will call Martin, and I remained. We drank and talked about our experiences. Between the confidence and the alcohol, he encouraged me to tell him that many times I had to defend my friends or hit them, since they had had problems with some other neighborhood. Whoever it was, he looked at me, angry, and without further ado he said to me, "Look, asshole, I hope you never lay a finger on my sister, because if you do, you'll be screwed." I must tell you that I am a person with a strong temper, and since I was already drunk, I got angry and answered him, "So look, dude, I'm not afraid of you, so whenever you want we can beat each other up, neither of us how much you want." And we started to fight. The blows were made without considering the consequences. Soon some of us tried to separate us, while others also started to get involved in the fight, until my wife appeared, who stopped the fight, and I left things there for the peace. From then on, the atmosphere became quite uncomfortable. At home I couldn't see my brother-in-law because he put me in a very bad mood, and neither could I see him. Although apart from that, living in my in-laws' house was tolerable. One night, my wife and I were awakened by loud screams. It was my little girl who wouldn't stop crying. My wife took care of her and fed her so she could go back to sleep, but nothing seemed to comfort her. It wasn't until the sun had almost come up that she was able to fall asleep. We thought it was a one-time thing, but no. Every night from that day on, my house would wake up crying exactly at. It was 3 in the morning, and the worst thing about it was that we couldn't do anything for her. Worried, we decided to take my daughter to several doctors, who assured us that the girl was in perfect health and explained why she was reacting that way. We tried many things to find out what was causing her condition, especially because as time went by, her crying became worse. Now she was vomiting a thick white liquid that was getting thinner, and I swear that the moment came when I sensed that sooner or later she was going to die. I already mentioned that I believe in things beyond the human, and that mysticism, shamanism, and magic are present in this place in a very noticeable and strong way. My mother advised me to go to a witch doctor from a town that was 40 minutes from the capital. She had a lot of faith. He produced you, whom we will call King. At that time I only got along well with one of my wife's brothers, whom I will call Tavo. We both went to the town. We arrived at the place where the witch doctor attended consultations, after waiting for about an hour. This man appeared, told us that he was already waiting for us and knew very well the reason, that he did not know what happened until he was there. I went. We looked at each other skeptically, but we did not say anything. He asked us to accompany him. As soon as we took him out, the room where he worked had many saints in the back, a very large Santa Muerte which would be about 3 or 4 meters high. He asked me to shuffle a deck of cards and choose 10, and I did. And when I finished, we waited for his answer. I told him that what I needed to know was who he was harming my daughter, because he was sure it was some kind of witchcraft. Of course, I had a feeling that it was someone in my wife's family, but I needed certainty so I could take action. Being who I am, I was ready to tell him off and kill him if necessary. I find that when you have a child in danger of death, you resort to whatever it takes to save his life. The king turned the cards over and with his hand and chin asked me, "Hey, why? What do you want to do with your father-in-law?" I glanced at my brother-in-law, who was stunned listening to what he had said. "Asshole, is that what you say?" And I answered that the witch doctor told me that it appeared there that, as I was suspecting, there was a very strong witchcraft work on that family and I was somehow involved in it. I didn't have time to see with divination, so I told him everything that was happening and he told me that the work had fallen on someone in the family, but that since the girl was the weakest, all the energy, evil, it was consuming her. He advised me to get out of the way immediately or else the girl would die. Then he gave me some powders that I had to take so that the bad energy would disappear from me and my wife, and I should also give that to my girl so that she would slowly recover. When he finished, he charged me 1,500 pesos, and from there things began to seem suspicious to me. Those who have been close to real witch doctors know that they do not charge that amount for any of their services. My brother-in-law and I arrived at the prison and I told my wife what had happened. Luckily, everything had been done in a house that could have been avoided, although with some shortcomings. This did not bother us in the least and the four of us left my in-laws' house. In the following days, my daughter improved noticeably. I had not taken the powders and I did not give them to my daughter either. I told him, I have to. If he took it, I would do it too. He thought for a moment and told me that he didn't have a good feeling because the man didn't tell us what it was. I agreed and we didn't come to the conclusion that it would be best to throw them out in 6 months. Everything was fine and calm for us. However, the problems of increasing a case of my in-laws due to back and forth. His parents ended up separated and with them 2 sides were formed between the 7 children. The house belongs to my wife's father and for that reason, it was her mother who had to leave the place. I had nothing against the lady. My wife is very freckled, she is made of wood. She offered to live with us in. A short time later there were already 5 of us in the house. The strange thing was that a few days later my daughter began to wake up again at 3 in the morning to cry. On that occasion there were some strange manifestations, such as noises of footsteps on the roof sheets and when I raised some small dust, we can distinguish human figures. My daughter's health went downhill in a flash, only now it wasn't little by little but all at once. She was the same as when we lived at my father-in-law's house and the liquid she vomited this time was the color black. This pissed me off a lot. I was completely desperate because I didn't know what else to do to make them whole. I expected the worst. I wanted to find a way to find out who was to blame for everything, but the circumstances were not in my favor, or so I thought. It turns out that my job went to an old friend who, well, fell out for a while but then became a bodyguard for a local deputy. My job came to eat because I have my own restaurant. When I saw him, we sat down to talk about what was happening in our family and I told him. He wanted to see his wife since she was into Santeria and so on. He thought for a while and then said, "Blow, no way, don't go with her. The truth is not good and it's not going to solve your problem. Look, I'm going to recommend that you go see his father instead. He's not just any witch. Because of the tackle he's done things you can't even imagine. Most witches loot the gourd they work with for Santa Muerte, but he works directly with the boss, Chamucos himself, who attends to the requests he makes. But I must tell you one thing. With him you are not going to spend 2 or 3 pesos. His work costs a good wad of bills. If you are in a hurry, you do not want your daughter to die, drink as soon as possible. Come with me now and I will give you a quick remedy, but note that it will not work for you." We got on his motorcycle and traveled for a long time until we reached a river. We both got into it. He asked me to look for a couple of reeds. It should be said that the ones I found were women's in green and resistant carts. We cut a couple and made a cross that he tied with. He gave me a thread that he wore around his neck and told me to put it under my daughter's crib, that for a couple of days she would sleep well. I gave him the ones I had created before I got to the river. I was going to leave my business again. He advised me to go see the witch doctor and he also gave me some instructions. Look, if you are going to go see him, you need to bring several things. I will tell you what they are, but not until I am sure that he wants to continue. Look for my house, dude, and I will tell you what you are going to use. We said goodbye and already at night. I checked my house. I know that he in my backpack, the reed cross that to my surprise was already completely dry, as if it had been cut for a long time. I put it under my little daughter's crib. Fortunately it worked. My daughter slept like an angel all night. For my part, I spoke with my wife, my brother-in-law and my mother-in-law about what my camera had told me that afternoon. We all agreed that the best thing was to go see him. That was it, to see how my daughter's health was consumed to the end. The next day my wife and I went to see My friend, who did not receive us very well and asked us to sit down so he could talk. To begin with, he warned us that the trip would be very hard, because where the witch lives is quite far away. He also told us that we should bring several things. Red candles, a chicken for each person who was going to go plus an extra, rue, pirula, albacar, mezcal, sweets, flowers of various species, a pack of cigarettes, for beers, 8 duck eggs and some soft drinks, as well as bringing enough money with us. He also explained step by step how to get there. He said goodbye to us until we reached our destination, wishing us good luck on the trip. For a whole week I dedicated myself to getting things, and, strange as it may seem, what I had the hardest time finding were duck eggs. They say that these are the best for the job because they have the most resistant shell. When the weekend came, we decided to take the trip. My wife, my brother-in-law Tavo, my daughter, me and my mother-in-law. She insisted on staying at the house. She would rest and take care of it. The next day we got up very early to have everything we had ordered north. We left the capital of Oaxaca at approximately 9 in the morning. The trip was quite long and hard to get to the southern mountains of the state. To tell you that we arrived at the town at approximately 11 at night, and to get to the witch's house we spent approximately 1 hour more. When we arrived, a woman kindly greeted us and told us that the third one would take a while to arrive, and we expected him at approximately 1:30 in the morning. The man came in, looked at us carefully, and asked each of us to. We sat at a table, unlike the king, and he does not have a room full of saints, and there was no image of the Holy Death, and something very peculiar in the whole environment, something that I cannot explain to you with words. I can only describe it as a kind of heavy energy, but not uncomfortable. We all tried to tell him what had brought us to him and the urgency I had to finish with all this matter. He listened to our words and occasionally felt. It seems like a lot to me. It gave me more place before I. He also asked me to give them to him again. I did, and something that caught my attention was that this witch arranges them in a circle and not in a straight line like the other one had done. He kept thinking about what I discovered. Ayala, when arranging all the cards, began to speak. Indeed, there is a job here, because your first one was the 4 of Swords. What surprises me is that it is not only for you and your family, but it also seems that there is one more for your wife's mother. Your daughter is very small, that is why she found all the cards. Negative energy. By accepting your mother-in-law, he not only absorbed yours but hers as well. Those doing the work are 2 women, a man, his brother-in-law, and his wife, your wife's older sister. I immediately understood that it was Martin and his wife, and also my sister-in-law. Then he asked us to accompany him to a hill and bring the things he told us to do. When we arrived, we noticed that there were some stones arranged in a strange way. It was as if it were some kind of altar. He lit all the candles in a large circle and arranged some things among the stones, the sweets and several beers. The shot on the ground also did the same with the eggs and the soft drinks. He told me to come closer and also bring the chicken he had chosen for me. That's what I did. When he took it, he ran it all over my body, and the same with all of us, including the girl. When he finished, he said to him, Tavo, hey, I want you to take that axe and hit these chickens with blunderbusses. A worried face, because despite having a rather rough appearance, he is quite noble and does not have the courage to do something like that. Seeing his face, he offered to do it, and I cut off the heads of all the chickens. Only one remained. The witch had lit 4 cigarettes and was putting them in the beak of each chicken. In an instant they all died almost instantly, except for my daughters. We could see how the head of the animal stuck out the back of the cigarette and the tube, yes, for a good while, until it finally perished too. The tone gave me a good thorn. I was seized by a strong despair. I wanted to ask him what that meant, but I did not dare. He asked me to stand in front of him again. I obeyed. What happened next is something that still disturbs me to this day. He told me to stretch my arm towards him, and I agreed. With my own eyes I can swear that I saw how the witch took out a nail, then a pin, chili peppers and glass. He took out all those things. He checked. I couldn't believe it. I didn't feel pain, but I did see how my skin stretched with each thing he took out. At the end of my path, my wife, my brother-in-law, between us, caught with more than 70 pins, and that's not counting the other objects. He then asked us to hold my daughter and those sons of bitches. If a single pin comes out of my daughter, let me go. The witch proceeded, but fortunately from my daughter's miracle not a single thing came out. He told us that my daughter was very weak, and for that reason she was the most perceptive to everything, and she would continue to do so for the rest of her life. He went to the stones and made a small bag that contained several plants. He told me that, no matter what happened, my daughter should always carry that amulet with her. You can walk like that without any problem, but don't risk taking this muletto from your daughter for anything in the world, and it has always been that way. Since then, my little girl has to do it very slowly, as if it were another extension of her body. The witch doctor asked us to put a padlock of those made of reeds and put the kachina that was left underneath. He told us, "Get comfortable there because we have to wait about 40 minutes. While we waited for more things from the girl, we drank some beers that we had brought. When time passed, Peru shared. The basket, to our surprise, was china had disappeared. In its place there was a doll without a face or any other kind of feature. The witch doctor showed it to us and with a knife he opened it in half. Together we looked at the contents that, in addition to pins, glass, chili peppers and nails like the ones that had been taken from our bodies, it had a toy. It was a motorcycle with 2 people riding on it. The witch asked us if any of us had a motorcycle and I immediately told him that it was me. Clearly it was my wife and me. All the evil that has been done to them, he told us. Let me tell you that this type of work must be resumed from time to time, to be more exact, every 2 or 3 years, but if you want afterwards I can go to your house to clean it and also to check on your mother-in-law, because surely there is another job on top of her. He was very grateful for everything and I asked him how much he would be for the job. He told me the amount and that I should give him the money right then because it was needed to cure him. My brother-in-law did not let me stay and it was he who took out the bills. The witch grabbed them and said some words that I could not understand. Then he set fire to the money and threw it in the same place where he had offered the sweets and the beer. That night we will stay at his house because it is impossible to leave there until now, since it was almost 4 in the morning. He lent us some mats and offered us a cot. I also told my wife to lie down and my brother-in-law to lie down on the floor. No one said a word. I didn't start talking because I wanted to avoid saying anything that wouldn't please the gentleman, but I'm sure no one could sleep. At approximately 6 or 6:30 in the morning, we heard a knock on the door. The witch doctor went out to open it and we got up too. It was a van that urgently asked to see him. Several men got out of it, carrying a car that could no longer walk or stand on its own. The witch doctor did not take them to where he was attending to us, but took them directly to the hill. We went back inside and waited for the man to return to thank him for his hospitality. A little over an hour later, the bushy man came walking. Along with the others behind the witch doctor, I was surprised to see how much power he had, that he could make people walk, although the price for such vapors was most likely very high. We agreed with the witch doctor to meet a month later in the capital of Waka to do the work that followed, and so it was. During the following days and up to now, my daughter had a noticeable improvement. She stopped crying and vomiting those liquids and everything seemed much calmer. Then it was time to meet this man again. When he was with, the first thing he did was ask for me. Overcreated, we got exactly the same things he had asked us for the last time. He did the same with the slaughtered chicken and also took out my mother-in-law, several nails and pins from the body, all this in full view of everyone. Again the tone confirmed that what I don't know is us. On that hill it was not something he had prepared beforehand or that could have some kind of trick. He also asked us for a basket of reeds that he provided us with the same grade. He put another one that was Chinese underneath and we waited the same 40 minutes. When they passed, the witch turned the basket over and the reed was no longer there, only the doll-like end remained, similar to the one that appeared when I went to see him. He lifted it up about halfway and what appeared left my mother-in-law perplexed, because she had not expected that. It was a piece of one of her dresses. Your own children who have done this work, my mother-in-law told him, who was dismayed. Then, addressing us, he told us that we can return all the evil that they had trying to do against us because they were looking for the separation, illness and death that yesterday in my family. For my part, I would have said yes, because nothing would please me more than to see how the same evil that they threw at us consumes them, but my wife and my mother-in-law said no, because at some point evil would come against us. Afterwards, the witch asked us for dirt from each of the corners of the house and he was making a kind of prayer over it. Then he scattered it around the place and the surroundings. We can clearly see the human figures that ran in various directions were arms and legs that could also be distinguished separately. It's been a little over 2 years since this experience happened to us and I don't know if it's their management or these sons of their mother, but a couple of months ago noises have been heard again on the roof of the house and I can also see some figures watching me from the darkness. But if so, I'm not afraid anymore, although it has been cowardly that I am willing to face things, come what may. After all, it can get to me. Going through so much, the charlatan and without deception, can find me an ally, a true witch. The True Witch, story based on an anonymous real experience, written and adapted by 10 Idris for horror stories. If you want to know more stories by the same author, I invite you to visit the link that I will leave in the description of the video. We'll hear each other in the next story.